All right. Good evening, everyone. Madam Mayor, members of council. Out of practice, I like to appear before you quarterly, and I believe in a philosophy of elevating the bench, hence the additional personnel. I use these opportunities as leadership opportunities for growth, as we won't always be here, so there's an opportunity for them to follow and lead. So with that, not yet, we're going to have a comprehensive public safety strategy. We're going to talk about some of those elements. We're also going to talk about year-to-date gun data, year-end crime data presented by crime analyst Melissa Hendren, departmental initiatives, employee recognition, and new personnel presented by Senior Deputy Chief Surles. And then we're going to have an overview of departmental reorganization by Deputy Chief Bain and Senior Deputy Chief Surles. Next. So real quick, this isn't an all-inclusive list. This list is subject to expand as we expand and as we expand our philosophies within the spirit of 21st century policing. So with respect to community policing, the community is at the heart of our service here in Urbana. Through our philosophy of community policing, we're going to empower every member of the department, to include myself, to our most recent academy graduate, to serve the community through the lens of community policing. This means when properly staffed, our police officers will start attending meetings and events so that they can participate in community conversations, hear about community concerns, and take steps to address the issues. Now, one of the emails that came in last week when Michelle was here, someone said that I make an attempt to attend everything, and I do. I will go to anything that remotely touches law enforcement or not. I think it's important we have a good understanding of what's going on in the community, and it's important that they see the police chief there, and as we grow, they'll start to see officers in these same spaces. We're going to explore beat remapping. This is something Michelle addressed last week. With respect to our patrolman deployment, in that we often have units outside the scope of their responsibility due to staffing issues. Once that is corrected, it will greatly reinforce our community policing philosophy, and that we will have officers assigned to the same patrol areas every day at the same time. This will empower our officers to get to know the community they serve and to take ownership and pride in working with the public to make these areas safer. New crime analysis. As a department, as you've seen, we've provided you all with data monthly with respect to the city and with respect to your respective wards. We are leveraging data to disseminate intelligence about criminal activity and crime trends, and we use that intelligence to guide our resources with respect to deployment. This strategy will also include the new crime analyst unit led by Melissa Hendren. I feel like I butcher your name. And her staff, her newly developed staff. She'll speak more about her unit during her presentation, but I just want to say I'm extremely proud of her with respect to adhering to my expectations as it relates to data. I'm data heavy, and she's embraced it, and she has done a tremendous job in deploying that information where it needs to go. We're also going to take a look at, this isn't on the list, but crime, gun intelligence. I think it's important that you see not just where shootings are occurring, because this map really doesn't capture that, but you see the number of incidents that our officers come into contact contact with illegal guns. And you'll see a map. It breaks down year to date how we're trending in that regard. And with respect to alternative to policing, my staff and I are currently looking at calls for service that non-sworn personnel can respond to. There needs to be a discussion on that as to where these folks are housed and who does the training. Barry Dunn indicated the next phase regarding their report will include mental health response, and I'm going to pause right there because I think that requires community input. Now, I just want to be clear, I do embrace alternative response, particularly when you talk about mental health calls, because when you look at officer-involved shooting, 25% of those involve mental health calls. Tactic, this is a grant that Senior Deputy Chief Surles put together before I arrived. It cost us nothing, obviously. It was an opportunity for us to provide services to our youth or adolescents that's been impacted by trauma. We're merely looking for an opportunity to leverage that grant with a partner. I've been in conversations with Kim Sims. I understand that's something she looks at, but it may go somewhere else. And before we even start about deploying that, we need to get your approval first. And community partnerships through intelligence-led policing. An example of that would be the last time I met in front of you all, we had a presentation on domestic violence. The data indicated that we needed to develop a partnership with Courage Connection. As a result, my staff and I met with Courage Connection, and together we explored opportunities where we could work together to better serve those impacted by domestic violence. We currently have an actionable partnership where we provide them data on a monthly basis, and they in turn come to our briefings and provide information to our officers to better serve, again, those impacted by domestic violence. We are currently working on a data sharing agreement with the Housing Authority of Champaign County to address criminal activity on those properties as well. Some months ago, I also spoke with Cunningham Township about developing a policy and how UPD would assist them and better serve the homeless population. Now, we're in the embryo stages of that, and that was months ago, and I'm not sure where that may go. We also met recently with a representative of Silver Hearts, I should say, as the data indicated there were problems in the Vada area. We will show a slide momentarily where that area continues to have problems. And lastly, something that we recognize as a problem here in Urbana is youth violence. I'm in the embryo stages of putting something together with Tracy Dace and Dream Academy with respect to a police athletic league for our youth during the summer. The other day, I should mention that I met with folks from First Federal Savings Bank, a Mr. Jack Wallace and Tyler Rouse. They had concerns about downtown activity with respect to crime. And I want to thank Kim Smith for putting that meeting together. One of the things we talked about was putting together the Urbana Business Association, which used to exist but no longer exists. And I thought it would be a good idea, since we have a couple of officers already in communications with those folks addressing community concerns as well as business concerns. So with that, Next. So I spoke about briefly during my last comments about gun data. Next. So if you take a look at that map, this is year-to-date gun data. I want to start with a fresh map. And you'll see there are different color codes for each gun symbol on the map. And you'll see that there are gun crime at the tune of, it looks like 20. Stolen firearms, it looks like 3. Seized firearms, looks like there's 12. Recovered firearms, there's 3. Seized ammunition, 6. And recovered ammunition, 3. So the reason we want to cover that is it gives you an idea of the number of weapons that our officers come into contact with. It also shows you the level of their training. And I say the level of their training because anytime you introduce a gun into a particular scene, there's an opportunity for an officer involved shooting. We hadn't had any of those. But I think it's important that we collect that data so you will get a holistic look at the gun issues in our community. Showing shots fired isn't enough. It's important that you see the number of handguns on the street. That is just from January to where we are today. I didn't want to show you last year's because it would make your head pop. Next.
Okay, so I'm going to move this closer to me. I'm going to talk through the year-end dashboard, and then we'll talk about year-to-date. So this first one, we're looking at all crime that happened in 2022 compared to all crime that happened in 2023 for the full year. So last time I described in detail the offenses, so I won't go over all of that again, but I will remind you that this represents reported crime only. So these are only incidents that are recorded on police reports. As you can see, violent crime from 2023 was about 1% lower than it was in 22. There were line item increases with 1 additional homicide, 15 additional robberies, and 33 additional incidents of domestic violence. But overall, there were 886 violent crimes compared to 881 violent crimes. So violent crime was down a little bit. Property crime was also down. We went from 1176 incidents in 22 to 1072 incidents in 23. And these decreases were driven by fewer burglaries and thefts, but there was a notable increase in motor vehicle thefts as followed the national trend. Next. And so visually, this just shows the slight decrease in violent crime, in Part 1 violent crime that we had from all of 2022, looking at all of 2023. Next. Similarly, this shows the 9% decrease that we had in property crime. And looking at just the shots fired incidents from 22 to 23, the total number of shots fired incidents was lower last year, but the number of individuals hit by gunfire increased. So 10 people were shot and injured last year, and 3 people were shot and killed last year in Urbana. Moving on to just 2024. So the last dashboard, we were looking at data for the whole entire year, and this is different. We're looking at January 1st to March 23rd, 2023, and comparing that to January 1st to March 23rd, 2024. So it's a year-to-date comparison to look at where we were at this exact point last year and where we are at today, or on March 23rd. So as you can see, we've had 3 additional rapes reported this year, 3 additional robberies, and 3 additional non-fatal shootings. But overall, with the decreases in assault and battery, violent crime is down 4% overall. With property crime, burglaries for motor vehicles have increased, as well as motor vehicle thefts, but burglary and theft are down. property crime as a whole is 18% lower than at this point last year. So when looking at all Part 1 crime, there have been 8% fewer incidents involving a serious property or violent crime. Next. So here's a pin map of all Part 1 violent crime in Urbana that has been reported in 2024 up through last week. And you can see some spatial concentration, but this is a pin map only, so the things are gonna plot on top of each other. So if you count all of the individual incidents, you're gonna come up with a different number because they're layered one on top of each other. Again, showing visually the year-to-date Part 1 violent crime. We're down a little bit from where we were at this point last year. And this is a map of the property crimes that occurred in Urbana. And this one's it's interesting to see kind of the difference of where some of these things fall. So you can see more thefts that happen here right along Campus Town. You can see more motor vehicle thefts occurring North Urbana. So it's just interesting to see how these things spatially cluster. So overall, so far, we're down a little bit in property crime this year as well. Okay, so we did this map last year, or last presentation, and I redid the analysis with just 2024 data. There were fewer points considered this time because it's much earlier in the year, so I was looking at less data. But the same focus area that we identified in 2023, it retains its statistical significance. So these areas shaded in red represent the highest concentration of reported violent crime in Urbana. Next. And so looking at just the crimes that have been reported in those red blocks, it contains 20% of all violent crime in Urbana, and 35 of those police reports included violent crime. 46% of that violent crime was domestic battery. Also in this area, we had 4 robberies and 3 non-fatal shootings just since the first of the year.
There we go. All right. Deputy Chief Bain and I are actually going to split this up a little bit. I'm going to first start with accreditation. We spoke about accreditation the last time. We are using the state accrediting service called Illinois Law Enforcement Accreditation Program, or ILEAP. It's run through the Illinois Chiefs of Police Association. I guess it helps if you go to the slide. There's 69 overarching standards. Each one of those standards has subcategories of standards, and in essence what we need to do is we need to marry our department and city policy up against those standards, and in most cases provide a proof. So for example, if there's a standard that says you will custodial interrogations, you'll read Miranda. Okay, that's great. So I need to provide proof that we do it. So that's the sort of thing that we're talking about. I'm about 2/3 of the way through my initial review of our standards through compliance. That's not including the proof process, just the initial review and comparing the policies with the standards. So a lot of work there. You know, the director of the accrediting service said, "Oh, Rich, I think you can get it done in like 4 months." No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. The standards focus on 4 areas of law enforcement: administration, operations, personnel, and training. All right, Deputy Chief Bain's going to speak about strategic planning.
Good evening. So I'm sure that you've all heard now multiple times about the 21st century policing and the 6 pillars that contains, and the NAACP's 10 shared principles. One of the major steps that we have taken at the police department to include both of those within our department is a training that you also may be familiar with, called ABLE, which stands for Active Bystander for Law Enforcement. We conducted that training last year. We have continued that training this year, and perhaps just a couple of our brand new employees have not been through it yet, but everyone else has been.
So one of the things that the chief has been very purposeful about is recognizing the efforts of all employees. You know, we have employees that all contribute to public safety, and it's important to recognize that everyone has a part in that, to include sworn staff. So in an effort to enhance our workplace, the chief has introduced an Officer of the Month, Employee of the Month process, and that includes both sworn officers and civilian staff. They're nominated by their peers to an awards committee. The awards committee goes through the nominations and ultimately selects an Employee of the Month. The Employees of the Month thus far are Officer Tony Maneely, Officer Antoine Funchess, Support Services Supervisor LaShonda Cunningham, Detective Rich Coleman, who I think is in the back of the room. He is. And FOIA Specialist Tony Weck. They were all recognized by their peers, and you know, one of the things that comes out from the committee is really that public recognition of what they do and how they benefit the police department and the folks that we serve. And so that's they've done some really nice write-ups. I got to be honest with you. I emailed staff last time and I said, you know, that was really nice. I really appreciate that. So there's some people that are being really thoughtful about the work that our staff is doing. So that's a pleasure to see. In that same vein, we also held a department award ceremony where 10 certificates of merit were issued, 7 commendations. You know, for the longest time, our department did not issue commendations, and that was wrong in my estimation. But we really have some excellent officers doing some excellent work, and so I'm glad to see that commendations are up. And one of the things that that occurred in the last rating, in the last evaluation period, was a life-saving award. We have multiple officers that have saved lives. Whether, you know, one story I remember is Christmas morning, an officer providing CPR to a baby. Okay, that doesn't get any more memorable to that, right? So in addition to those certificate merits, commendations, and life-saving awards, we also issued our Civilian of the Year award, which went to LaShonda Cunningham, some of you might know, and our Police Officer of the Year award, which went to Officer Phil Berry. All right, Deputy Chief Bain's going to speak about new hires.
One of the positions that we've recently hired is our digital forensic specialist. His name is Andrew Rappelvich. He goes by Rap. As you can see, he's a U.S. Army vet. He was assigned to Special Operations in Baghdad. He ran a digital forensic lab for that area. I was talking to him the other day at lunch, and I had to stop him and just say, okay, I believe you. He was going way off. He's super knowledgeable. He's really going to help our investigations division, specifically with the digital analysis of phones, computers, and that such. And I think Melissa was going to talk on.
And we also recently hired Bethany Jenner as the criminal intelligence analyst. So she's been working side by side with me, and she also works with investigations to analyze criminal activity trends and patterns. She brings her experience from working with the Anchorage, Alaska Police Department, and we're excited to have her help build our analytical capabilities. So for example, at the crime data meeting a couple of weeks ago, she was able to do an in-depth analysis of our motor vehicle thefts, and was able to identify that not only are they clustered in the map, almost all of them occur at apartment complexes. So she was able to identify which apartment complexes they were occurring at, so then that gives us an opportunity to work with the managers and raise awareness.
Several of you might have seen too, we added a chaplain to our staff, Pastor John Porter from Mount Calvary Missionary Baptist Church. He was sworn in January 18th of 24. I'll continue on here. So this is a chart of the way that the chief envisions the department being reorganized. And and I apologize for my voice. I haven't had a voice for the last few weeks. Kurt, I'm going to talk about half of it, the half that I am in charge of as a deputy chief of operations. So under myself for the operations, well, basically, if you think of it, it'd be like the patrol division. They're the ones out in the cars responding to the 911 calls and such. Under that, there will be 2 police lieutenants. We've divided that up into a day shift and a night shift. I'll back up real quick. The patrol division is divided into 2 teams, a blue team and a gold team. Since we work 12-hour shifts, the rotation is 2 days on, 2 days off, then 3 days on. That 3 days is a weekend, and then the next week it flip-flops. So then they'll have 2 days off, 2 days on, 3 days off. So essentially, when one team is working, the other one's off, and then they flip-flop, okay? As of this morning, let me start with day shift. So the teams are called gold and blue. So the gold team day shift, which is from 7 o'clock in the morning to 7 o'clock at night, has 2 sergeants and 6 officers working, okay? The night shift has the same. And blue team days has the same. Blue team nights has the same. There is an overlapping shift from 3 p.m. to 3 a.m. That is currently only staffed by 1 sergeant. So 1 sergeant comes in from the 3 p.m. to 3 a.m. time slot on both days. So that's 24 officers that we currently have working the street in Urbana for every day of the week and every hour of the day, and 10 sergeants. We currently have 3 officers in the field training program, which means they have either been through the academy, they've been through the academy at one point, but they have been through an academy and they are training with our officers now. So that's 3. And we currently have 3 in the police academy. The way that the 3 to 3 middle shift is set up is for that one sergeant to have 3 officers within that shift. So the shifts are 2 sergeants and 6 officers for each day shift, 2 sergeants and 6 officers for each night shift, 1 sergeant and 3 officers for the middle shift. I've been here more than 24 years. I do not remember there might have been up 1 or 2. There might have been a 6-month period where we had that second shift filled. That is generally the first area where officers get taken to plug into the day or the night shift when things like injuries, pregnancies, deployments, things like those happen. That middle shift gets taken from to fill the days and the nights. So I'll just say I'm gonna brag on them for a little bit. Our patrol division is a fantastic group of officers. They are the ones that respond to the 911 calls. They're the ones that respond to the mental health crises. They're the ones that go to these unknown domestic violence situations. They are the backbone of the department. And if in reality, if you think of it, the way with the numbers that we have now, the way that they're set up is from 11 a.m. to 3 a.m. Our minimum manning staffing is 4 officers and a sergeant. That's not even every beat filled. The way that the beats are set up in the city right now is there's 5 of them. So 24, and that's good staffing. Just last summer, we had to pull the school resource officers from the school to help our void because our patrol division was down into the teens. And that, again, is to police Urbana 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That really gets tired. They really get tired of working minimum meetings, being mandatoried in. It was a grind. We're getting better. We've hired lots of new people, and they're coming around on their training. But I'll remind you, I think I've said it in the past, that when an officer quits, retires, we're already behind the ball for about a year. If we hire someone and they have to go to the academy and then go through our training, that's gonna, in the hiring process itself, it's gonna be about a year's time before we can get someone who is serviceable that we can put back into patrol. I'll continue on. I've spoken about the sergeants. They are the, they're in charge of the shifts. They do things such as ensure staffing levels. They will go to major crime scenes and be in command of those. They approve reports. They deal with inquiries or minor complaints on the shift. They're responsible for arrestees and juveniles when we take custody of them. They do a very good job of interdepartmental relations and morale. When you don't have much to work with, it's really hard to keep that up sometimes, and they do a fantastic job at that. They will respond to calls when appropriate, because it doesn't take much for a shift of 3 officers to be caught up into something very quickly. Some of those calls that require more than 1 or 2 officers' response, so they do step in and respond to calls when appropriate. Under that, we have the officers. I don't know that I need to explain what a police officer does according to our directives and stuff. They're the ones out there doing it. They're the ones out responding to the calls and handling business as it comes. You'll see on one side of that, below that, is resource officers. That position has actually been following me for the time, because 2014 to 17, 18, I was the school resource officer. I still have pretty good relationships with some of their staff over there, so that position just kind of fell onto me for supervision. But what you need to know about the SROs is there's one at the middle school and one at the high school full-time. What they do is they work with staff there to basically form a triangle of police, teaching, and counseling. They work extremely hard to find alternative methods of discipline, not simply just arresting them. And they work with the staff there every day. They report right to the school, and they end their shift at the school as well. Under the other side is a canine officer. We have 1 canine officer currently. He has a dog, Red, that is to be utilized for narcotics detection, article searches, and tracking. And that can be tracking of both missing or endangered people or suspects of a crime, and there's certain criteria. But he is included as one of the officers in the shift. He still responds to calls for service and gets pulled away when the canine is needed. You'll see one more box under there. It's called a Special Problems Unit, and it's orange. That means it's new. And so Chief Boone is going to speak on his vision for a Special Problems Unit.
So with respect to the Special Problems Unit, I wanted to forecast Barry Dunn's recommendation with respect to CRS. So, like I said, we've come up with a list of calls for services that unit could possibly respond to. I just don't know the appetite of council the community as it relates to the housing of said unit and the training of said unit. But that's what I'm forecasting, and Michelle spoke to it best, I thought. I think she very clearly said if we should go that route, that group should be housed within the police department. I'm talking about the alternative response team.
Okay, so let's delve into the right side of the organizational structure you see there underneath the Deputy Chief of Investigations and Administrative Support. We're going to start with the Criminal Investigations Lieutenant, that's CID Lieutenant. They're responsible for the overall performance and administration of personnel in the Investigations Division. They have a detective sergeant that reports directly to them, who assists detectives with the direction, philosophy, resource allocation of various cases, and this includes the assignment and distribution of cases to various detectives that are assigned to work the Investigations Division. We have an administrative assistant in the Investigations Division. Their job, primarily, she wears many hats. Her job is most focused on case management, tracking, and in all the pieces and parts associated with case management. You know, we write about 7,000 police reports a year, and she has to have an answer for every single case that we do. Is it open? Is it closed? Who's assigned follow-up? Is it assigned to a detective? When did it go to the state's attorney's office? So on and such forth. So as you would suspect, there's quite a lot of work there. She does yeoman's work. This Investigations Division also houses various detective roles, both adult detectives and juvenile detectives. And when I say adult and juvenile, I'm referring to both victims and offenders. And then they also house our 2 street crimes detectives, who are primarily responsible for investigating firearms, violent offenses involving firearms, and narcotics offenses. Below the street crimes detectives is a financial crimes investigator. This is a civilian position who focuses on complex financial crimes. Those cases are not easy. You need to understand the complexities of working financial crimes and generate relationships, quite frankly, with local financial services to oftentimes properly investigate those. We, of course, have evidence custodians. They're responsible for the physical management of evidence and digital evidence, and they disseminate that evidence wherever it needs to go. Does it need to go to the state's attorney's office? Does it need to go to the crime lab? So on and so forth. And then the last position within the Investigations Division, assigned to the Investigations Division, is the Digital Forensic Specialist. That's a position council approved 2 years ago, I believe, but we just got filled with Andrew Rapolovich, as Deputy Chief Bain mentioned. He comes with a vast amount of experience, courtesy of his experience in the U.S. Army doing digital forensics. So I'm going to pause there, and I'm actually going to punt it to Melissa for crime analysis.
So it's our new crime analysis unit with Bethany and myself, and we work to identify crime trends and patterns between incidents. We're responsible for social network analysis and other processes by which we're able to hopefully identify those very few individuals responsible for driving a majority of our serious violent crime. And as a result of that, that will enable us to focus resources on those with the highest propensities for crime and violence.
Okay, continuing. Underneath what's labeled as the Administrative Lieutenant, you might remember them being the Services Division Lieutenant. First I think I'm actually going to discuss the Support Services wing that has both PSRs, or Police Service Representatives, and the FOIA Specialist. Our Support Services Supervisor is responsible for overall operations for our front desk staff. That goes 17 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The police services representatives serve as the front line with respect to non-sworn engagement with the community, typically over the phone, although sometimes in person, providing essential information and customer service. This includes some level of report taking, both over the phone and electronically online. Our FOIA specialist is responsible for processing FOIA requests, and there's quite a bit of work there. But additionally, the FOIA specialist is responsible for registering, per state and federal statute, persons who are mandated to register with local police departments. Okay, so now I want to slide back to the administrative lieutenant and discuss them briefly. The administrative lieutenant has probably the most vast network of responsibilities within the police department of all the lieutenants. While the patrol lieutenants have a lot of work, it is concentrated with respect to patrol operations. While the investigations lieutenant has a lot of work, it's concentrated on high-level serial violent crime investigations. The administrative lieutenant is responsible quite literally for everything else. So when it comes to, for example, reporting data, compliance with state and federal requirements with respect to access and use of state and federal databases, this lieutenant's also in charge of tracking training for every officer in the department. The state mandates that every officer have a certain level of training and hit certain training mandates. That lieutenant is responsible for tracking that. The lieutenant is also responsible for developing and disseminating annual training, control tactics, firearms, state mandates, ABLE. All these things fall underneath this lieutenant's wing. It's a lot. Having served in the capacity as a training coordinator for the department before, just the training coordinator, I've never served in this role, but just sort of peeling off training I did for a while. It is a lot, and it is time-consuming, and it is complex, and with the ever-increasing level of state mandates that are coming to us, it is increasingly more important that we really stay on our game with respect to meeting all those state and federal obligations. So sliding down from the administrative lieutenant, there's, again, as Deputy Chief Bain pointed out, there's an orange box, which means that it is a proposed new position. This is the training sergeant. The intention of this position is to slide all those training requirements off, slide all of requests for special events off. You know, the development of these trainings are complex and difficult. And so the hope is that by peeling off some of these responsibilities, that's going to free up the administrative lieutenant for purposes of leaning into the, again, new orange box, Office of Community Relations. I'm going to pause there and see if anybody has anything. Nope? Okay. I'm going to keep rolling. Under the Office of Community Relations, it's a bit of a half situation. We have half of this up and running, half of it not. Our CCR team is up and running. Our peer support and chaplain system is up and running. But what is pending with respect to this new office is the community engagement team and the clergy patrol. We've taken some steps with respect to clergy patrol, but we're in a bit of a holding pattern with respect to community engagement until we work through the budget process. So I think I've explained the right side.
Very good. So if you'll take a look at this org chart, what you'll see is Deputy Chief of Operations. And if you move from your left to your right, right under Executive Assistant, or right above it, I should say, should be another Deputy Chief. Should be. I understand that there are financial constraints. So the task of managing that middle column investigations as well as the administrative support function is falling under Senior Deputy Chief Surles. In a perfect world, there should be 3 deputy chiefs. I'll pause there on that. The orange spots, folks, the last time we met, November 6th, regarding the increase in personnel, I understood your concerns with respect to the Barry Dunn report. The Barry Dunn report as far as staffing is concerned, basic staffing is complete. That orange box is outside the scope of Barry Dunn's report. So with that, I'll pause for now and field any questions you may have.
Are there any questions? Mary Alice?
Thank you for providing an overview of kind of your vision on where you see the police department going. Right now, we have Deputy Chief of Operations is Deputy Chief Bain. Is that correct? So
That's
it's orange. I'm just trying to figure out, like, is it a different title or is it?
It's orange because, one, when before I got here, he was acting in that capacity. Two, he went through a process where he performed at a level that I am comfortable in making him an official deputy chief. It's orange because the last time we met, the recommendation to move forward with additional personnel was paused.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that explanation. I appreciate it. The Special Problems Unit that's kind of like a placeholder right now, and you had said that it depends on training and housing in terms of where those staff would be, and I'm assuming that relates to the Barry Dunn, the CRS personnel that they were referencing?
That's correct.
Okay, all right. I did have a question about some of the data that you guys were going through. Melissa's probably not surprised. I guess it just, without even looking at numbers, I guess my main question is this. For many, many years, the Silver Water area has been troubling. And we have tried many different ways to address from different angles. There's an actual like special overlay in terms of how people repair the different places. We've gone after some of the landlords. There's lots of things that are going on, and I believe this is where you did the all hands on deck, if I remember correctly. Do you have any other ideas or on how we could help this neighborhood?
Yes. I don't know if you all are familiar with CityStat. CityStat is a process in which various department heads or departments kind of take a piece of this responsibility. The first step we took in going out there was a first step. The next phase should be capturing what you've observed, what you were able to address, and what will require follow-up. It's a process just by looking at that environment alone that in order for it to improve will take continuous follow-up, continuous engagement, not just with the city, or government, I should say, but with nonprofits as well. There needs to be a mechanism in place in which there is monthly follow-up, such as what I do within the police department. We have these crime meetings where we meet every day, and there's robust discussions about what's trending, what can we do to avert some of that, which is why you're seeing your crime stats decrease. We're very surgical in our approach, and we hold each other accountable with relentless follow-up. So when you talk about an area, it's going to require just that. It's going to require input from the various department heads. They're going to be held accountable for what falls in their lane if it's not addressed. And what I've seen in other cities, it takes time, but there has to be a commitment to the process. And there has to be a tip of the spear, so to speak, to drive the process. And there has to be an understanding that you will be held accountable if there is not change for the process. At the risk of sounding confident, I know how to do that, but that's not my role.
All right, thank you.
Grace?
Thanks for the presentation. Do you know when you plan to make another request for some of these expanded positions in the orange boxes here?
I will have to have further conversation with the city administrator and other staff to see what would be the best time to request that.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay. Do you have anything else you want to share? All right, thank you.
Can I
Very-
say
Oh,
one
sorry, Mary
thing?
Alice, go ahead.
No, I don't have a question. I just want to thank Melissa and the chief for prioritizing data, my favorite thing. I want to thank everybody for honoring all the good work that the police department and civilians do to see the public safety. And also to thank you for giving us quarterly updates. It's very appreciated.
I'll just close with this, folks. July 31st, when the mayor swore me in, I promised that we will be a different department by way of manpower, by way of community relations, and by way of data. I think we are delivering that. Those orange boxes, folks, we need your help. We have dedicated women and men. We have dedicated citizens that want to help, and they like what they're seeing. But we need motion. I have a man to my right that's been acting, unofficially acting. That doesn't do us any good in terms of morale when the rank and file sees there's no traction. We're talking about it, traction, but we need your help. I think we've delivered a product that you should be proud of. We're in, for the most part, we're on television, we're in the media for good stuff, for the most part. I want to thank most of you for showing up at some of our events. I recognize that life is busy and it gets in the way sometimes that you can't attend. But folks, I promise you, we are going to continue to move forward in a good way. But we need your help. Now, we've been patient, and it's time for you all to do what you told me you would do. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I think the next.
Jay, I'd like to say something.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Sharice.
I want to kind of piggyback on what Mary Alice was saying. I appreciate the information. I appreciate the fact that every quarter or so we get separate ward analysis, crime information, or what's going on in our ward, and how what instead of guessing or people making accusations about stuff, we actually have hard numbers where we can share that with our communities in whatever ways we choose to do that. And the other thing I do want to say, I do think that it's important that when people do good work, they should get a pat on the back. Nobody wants to feel unappreciated for the hard work that they do, and I appreciate Chief Boone doing that with his staff, and I hope sincerely that is something that can be a exercise throughout actually the entire city on some level, that people want to know that they're doing a good job. They need to know that. So thank you, Chief Boone, for doing that.
Thanks, Sharice.